I'm Kerry Shale.
And I'm Daniel Crespin.
And this is Bob Dylan.
Approximately.
Sometimes I wonder why you can't treat me right. You do good all day, and then you do wrong all night. When you're with me, I'm 1,000 times happier than I could ever say. What does it matter, or what price I pay? They brag about your sugar. They brag about it all over town. Put some sugar in my bowl. I feel like laying down.
I have no idea what that song's about.
So, Spirit on the Water. This is you were surprised when I suggested this, right? You was or you wouldn't have chosen it.
Yeah, I said that it wouldn't have been. It wasn't that I disliked it. I kind of semi-ignored it on the album, but it was suggested by one of our Patreon subscribers.
Yes,
and this is the first time
the lovely Tanis. Thank you so much.
This is the first time we've it's the first suggestion we've gotten, even though we've been asking. Yeah, and so for any other Patreon subscribers out there, make some suggestions and we'll act on.
We'll do it, and it's got me back into modern times as well.
And me too.
Listening to it,
yeah.
It's always been. I really love this song, but I realise. We always talk about how Bob juxtaposes lyrics and music, and he's really done a number on me here because the tune of this is so relaxing and jaunty and joyful that I kind of just thought that was what the song was joyful and just kind of a loving, beautiful thing. Before looking into it, you realise all is not quite what it seems, which isn't surprising because the title of it comes from the second book of Genesis. So, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So,
can I just ask you a question before we get into the second book of Genesis?
Yeah.
How many books of Genesis were there? Because I don't understand the Bible.
No, I don't really get it. No.
Why was there a second book of Genesis? Like, did he create the world twice? I'm totally.
I don't know. Or is it second chapter? I don't know. I
thought it was from the like the very beginning of the Bible. Yeah. I thought it was from the first.
It's it probably is. So it's saying Genesis 1-2.
I think that's Genesis chapter 1.
Chapter 1.
Line 2.
Like verse 2 or something.
Verse 2, yeah.
My apologies to any Christians or Jews out there.
Yeah, this is
in terms of the Old Testament.
I think he only created the world once.
That's true.
Yeah.
But it's the beginning of the world, so ever since the world began, as he says later in the song.
Yeah.
So I genuinely used to think this was Bob Dylan's most romantic song. It's like, when you're with me, I'm 1,000 times happier than I could ever say. I mean, you don't get that from Bob very often, but I missed everything past about the fifth verse because I think up to the fifth verse, it's kind of, still quite about love, and then it changes. But by the fifth verse, I'm so engrossed in the tune that I just was kind of away on a cloud, I think, and hadn't really dug into it.
Yeah, that's why Dylan is so deceptive. This is an incredibly deceptive song.
Really, yeah.
Before we get back into the song, can I just talk a little bit about Modern Times? Because I'm not sure.
Please do.
Have we covered anything from Modern Times yet? I don't.
No, I think this
is
the first.
why I've been playing it like crazy. But so it was. Here's a few Modern Times facts. It was released in 2006. It was his first digitally recorded album. Mm-hmm. And although he used analog mics and analog preamps and analog sound desk, but he was so thrilled with the modern times of the recording studio that they didn't have to roll tape, that there was no more "Is It Rolling, Bob?" And that he could edit it so much more quickly. Yeah. So he really took to that.
Yeah.
It was his first #1 album since Desire.
Yeah.
Which is a long
time.
And it was the first time he played harmonica in the studio for almost 10 years.
Yeah, since Trying to Get to Heaven on Time Out of Mind.
Yeah. And that leads me to the title, which is so brilliant, because, particularly for this song, because it doesn't sound modern at all.
No.
This song really sounds like something out of the 1920s, kind of like the Django Reinhardt type guitar.
Almost like a 1920s song if they had modern equipment. It's that because it's a beautifully arranged and beautifully mixed.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally agree. It's not of this era.
No, it's got this kind of rolling feel.
Yeah.
This sort of and
it reminds me of a gentle sort of soft shoe shuffle or sway sort of thing on the dance floor.
Exactly. In fact, it reminds me of he's gone back to his song and dance man.
Yeah.
It is like there's something very much. The whole thing is like those sort of 1920s dinner jackets they wore. You can sort of see some guy in it with a little bow tie.
Yeah.
Sort of crooning
absolutely
into a microphone, which is why it's so deceptive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I am so sort of stunned actually at how hoodwinked I've been by this song, because it gets quite dark actually by the end of it. It starts with I've just got the lyrics in front of me here. So I've been thinking about you and I can't hardly sleep. I can't stay away. It's just complete fawning over someone. But by the end of it, I get the sense of someone who's almost in not an abusive, but certainly a toxic relationship where they're chasing and they're not getting anything in return. It's like, you could do whatever you want to me and I'll still come back to you like a little puppy dog, in a way, is kind of what I read by the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it occurred to me after listening to this kind of abusive love relationship thing going on, that I think it's another one of those songs, like you keep pointing out about various of his songs, dedicated to his muse.
Yes.
To his creativity.
Could be, yeah.
And he's chasing her, and she's, she was hot last night, but now what's going on? And, it seems like a lot of that, he's hopelessly in love.
That's a really good point. And I always frame, an acting career, which we both have, it is sort of like the most sort of abusive relationship there is, really. You give everything to it. You would drop everything at the last second for it. Yeah. And it rarely gives you much in return, But the moments it does are enough to warrant the next 5 years of trying. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I guess it's like that for songwriters and other creatives.
Exactly.
As well.
When you're not writing songs, you probably, like sometimes when I know myself, you, and all my actor friends, if you're not acting and you haven't done any acting for a while, you don't really feel like you're an actor. You're just some guy who says he's an actor. Yeah. And that's how people treat you when you meet them at parties and that sort of thing. Yeah. And this line, "I'd forgotten about you, then you turned up again," strikes me as the same thing. I always knew that we were meant to be more than friends. Yeah. So he had this lover, this muse, the creativity, the magic of lying there in the middle of the night and finally being able to solve, a songwriting problem or whatever it is. And then, no, she's gone. Yeah. She'll never come back.
But also, I imagine if you're as connected to the muse as someone like Bob Dylan is, there's also a sense of, if you've been gone a long time and you come back, there's a nuisance in that as well, because you've got to do something about it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh God, I could rest for a little bit, and now this idea's in my head and I can't get it out.
That's very good. That's exactly. I was looking at this line here. "Can't explain the sources of this hidden pain. You burned your way into my heart. You got the key to my brain."
I love that. You got the key to my brain.
I know, and that's where I was convinced that it was about the muse and not a lover, not a real lover. I mean, still, this whole thing seems to work. I've been trampling through mud, trying to find you. Yeah. Praying to the powers above. I'm sweating
blood. Sweating blood. Yeah, it really does get to, and I'm doing the research for this episode, thinking, how have I missed this? This to me has always been a song I put on. I think I mentioned it to you before when you were giving me a lift in your car, and I said, this is Spirit on the Water's my driving song in the summer. I love it, just like with the windows down, the sun, Spirit on the Water. But actually, it's a desperate song.
But it's actually quite beautiful. I mean,
beautiful.
The music is very beautiful. There's the guy who was the lead guitarist, Denny Freeman. Mm-hmm. He did an instrumental version of it. So clearly no lyrics, and it's as long as it's like 5 or 6 minutes long, and it's absolutely. I should send it to you because it'd be a great driving song because it's absolutely gorgeous. And people, I think he mentioned this in one interview once. He said, people don't give me enough credit for the music, and this is again. Suzanne walked into the room and said, "Oh, this is nice. You know, and I said, it's Bob Dylan.
Bob Dylan.
But she was listening to the vocal version, but she just thought it was a lovely little
It is.
beautiful tune.
And talk about like 7 minutes and 41 seconds, this song. It doesn't feel like a
No, it
long
doesn't.
song. And I don't really know how he manages to do that, because it doesn't change that much musically. It goes into it has a little bridge with the guitar side, and there it goes, I do, forgotten about you.
Yeah, they've got a couple
They've got a couple
of
generally
middle
it's the
eights
do. It's that tune
Yeah.
throughout, and then this beautiful harmonica solo at the end. And what a joy as a Dylan fan to hear him play the harmonica like that.
It sounds to
again.
me sort of half Dylan and half, you know, there's a guy called, I think his name was Toots Thielman, who
great
was a
name.
kind of a, possibly not his birth name, who was a great jazz harmonica player. And it sounds like he's been working on his jazz harmonica.
I have to say, like, I love Bob's harmonica work throughout his career, despite it giving me tinnitus, I think, like, because I've listened to so much early Bob harmonica and he goes very high on certain bits. But his technicality as a harmonica player has gotten so much better as he's gotten older. And, you know, you see him. Do you remember I showed you that clip of him doing Blind Willie McTell at the Scorsese thing?
Yeah.
It's an incredible blues harmonica solo
Yeah.
that he wouldn't have done in the 60s. I think he was using the harmonica more as an extra vocal tool almost. It was like another singer.
Oh,
in
I
the
totally
60s.
agree. I think it was almost like a nervous twitch in a way, his early harmonica.
Yeah.
It's because, you know, he had so much energy. He just needed to blow in and out with his mouth when he wasn't singing.
Yeah.
And, you know, and those were very interesting and kind of weird and scary and sometimes almost psychedelic.
Yeah. Especially in the 66 live recordings, because he really goes, sometimes someone could argue, overboard on the harmonica. So that blasted harmonica.
It brings to mind the thing that I know we've mentioned before on one other episode, but as we assume that not everybody's heard every episode, I'll just say it again. Do you remember that the classical music woman who said, today I'm going to discover Bob Dylan and see what
All along the Watchtower.
All along the Watchtower. That's right. And she put on the earphones, and she'd never heard All Along the Watchtower before, and it comes right in on the harmonica, and she was so, you know, sort
like
of well
physically
groomed.
upset.
She was physically upset. He was like, "Oh my God, stop! Will this pain never end?"
Yeah.
And it was only like the 20. It's not even 20 seconds the introduction, but I thought she was going to kind of just die of musical dissonance.
Yeah.
But it was wonderful. And I don't think she ever recovered. I'm not even sure she could listen to the words, because she just thought, but it is kind of, as you pointed out, somewhat off key.
Yeah.
It's very disconcerting. It's meant to be
deliberately.
disconcerting.
You think about, I mean, a classic example is something like "It's All Right, Ma, I'm Only Bleeding." Like, that's a really it's a difficult song to listen to sometimes for me, that, because it's just so brilliant but dark and about human nature, and the harmonica in that makes you on edge deliberately. I think.
You know, I was listening to that the other day just for, you know, just listening, and I really want to cover that.
Yeah, definitely. We'll cover that at some point.
I mean, I remember it was one of the things that when I was going back into Dylan after getting into the nice Bob Dylan, Nashville Skyline, and I first heard that, I mean, I stuck with it, but I just thought, because it's
dark.
It's one of his scariest.
Yeah, it's really scary song. Yeah, absolutely. I just want to talk about, I think, doing research for this and getting back into Modern Times, which is an album I don't know why I haven't revisited more.
No, me too.
I saw it's like an album that I know is brilliant, but I rarely listen to, and I don't really know why that's the case. But I just wanted to talk about how I don't think Bob gets enough credit as a producer, actually, because you look around Love and Theft and Modern Times, where he takes over the producing stuff, and suddenly you get these more cohesive albums because he has complete creative control, I think.
Yeah, it's so weird that he...
Or Jack Frost, whoever Jack Frost is.
Yeah, whoever he is. This iconoclast, this guy who blasted through all the doors and changed modern music for, you know, forever, that he was so welded to the idea of having a producer for so long.
Yeah.
When other people, way before that, were producing their own albums. Dylan just kept... Maybe he liked the conflict. I just find it almost inexplicable.
Yeah.
And then when he started producing... He had this string of great albums where he
Yeah.
didn't need to.
It's hard to think, isn't it? Because I think we have, and I think we do quite well to think of Dylan as the human being that he is. But there's this idea of Dylan, isn't there? And that idea of Dylan the genius, it's quite hard to think of him having self-doubt. But he naturally, like anyone, will have self-doubt.
No, he is a human being. And we're going to cover quite soon a song from Empire Burlesque where we'll talk about it then. But where I thought he was riddled with self-doubt.
Yeah.
He just and allowed himself to be, bamboozled by the music business, which he's always railed against.
Yeah.
But we'll get there. I want to get into there's an you may have come across this in your deep dive. There is a interesting website called Bob Dylan's Song Analysis by this guy called David Weir, and often it's given me some ideas that have, or things that have sparked off ideas. But I think he's completely wrong about most of this, because he says this is entirely addressed to Jesus. He does this very long, really long 12-point thing about how it's addressed to Jesus. I saw this,
and he does, and it's like in heading. So there's like the sun, about the imagery about the sun. Yes.
I thought he was, almost completely wrong. The only thing I got out of it, which I did find interesting, is that there's one word that is repeated 6 times in this song, and that word is ever.
Ever.
Yeah, as in, you ever seen a ghost? Ever since the world began, I'm 1,000 times happier than I could ever say. Can't believe these things would ever fade from your mind. I could live forever. You don't ever have to make a fuss over me, which is very interesting, because I think what he says, and I think he's right about this, it's a timeless, ever since the world began. It's all about, it's got a feeling of timelessness. I still think it's about his creativity, but it makes it expansive. It's even Spirit on the Water, even that. Well,
it
title,
makes it universal as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like this, 'twas ever thus. And all
yes.
that, it's which is what great art can teach you, I guess. Yeah, I it's interesting you say about the creative thing, because I sort of didn't see it that way, but actually now you say it, the abusive, because I just wrote down, so you do good all day, then you do wrong all night. He goes, sometimes I wonder why you can't treat me right. And then he goes, but the next bit is straight into, when you're with me, I'm 1,000 times happier than I could ever say. It's like this contradictory, you treat me like shit, but when you're here, I'm the happiest I could ever be. And that does make more sense, actually, in terms of the creative process, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the creative process, he did an interview. I don't know if you came across it. Jonathan Latham did an interview for Rolling Stone in 2006 to mark the release. And he talked to him a lot about producing and about writing this album. And he said some very interesting things. Like he said, why are you producing yourself now? And Dylan said, nobody's going to know how I should sound except me. Nobody knows what they want out of players except me. Nobody can tell a player what he's doing wrong. Nobody can find a player who can play, but he's not playing like I can. I can do that in my sleep. And then he goes on, you listen to these modern records, they're atrocious. They have sound all over them. There's no definition of nothing, no vocal, no nothing. Just like static. CDs are small. There's no stature to it.
Ooh. I don't know. I've missed that interview.
Yeah. Pretty great.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to that thing, I think, post 97, he suddenly goes, right, I've tried everything to be, in the 80s, I tried everything to fit in. It didn't work. In the early 90s, he lost all faith that he could even be a songwriter. And then I think 97 and Time Out of Mind was the first time he was like, do you know what? I'm just going to be me. And it worked.
Yeah.
And then from there, he goes, okay, well, I'm trusting my instincts. I'm going to produce it. And it seems to work, because Love and Theft and Modern Times are both brilliant albums.
And Rough and Rowdy Ways. So he'll never allow a producer in the booth again.
No, probably not.
I mean, he surprises us all the time, but I can't imagine him working with a producer again.
I think the thing is, a great music producer, generally, you think of like Rick Rubin. He's not an engineer particularly or anything like that, but he's really part of the creative process, and he's overseeing it, and he's taking it in different directions, and he's throwing ideas out. I don't think Dylan's about that. Dylan's so idiosyncratic and so unique and so clear in, well, is he clear in what he wants? I'm not sure, but it's always, I'm trying to put it into words, but I don't think there's room for going, should we try this and throw this out there?
Well,
but
I know
like,
that's
no,
why he was always fighting with Daniel Lanois.
Yeah.
Apparently from people, like I came across a wonderful interview with the engineer, and he was saying, that Lanois was bringing him all these treats and all these ideas, and it wasn't the way to approach Dylan. But there's a great story that I've been meaning to tell you, or maybe I have. I hope I haven't. It's the engineer noticed that Dylan was using just this. There were 3 pianos in the studio. Have I told you this one?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, I found it on YouTube. He was just telling stories, and some of them about Dylan. And he said there were 3 pianos in the studio, and there was like a Steinway. There was an old Steinway. There was a modern new Steinway, and then there was a somewhat older but also meant for sort of classical piano, a third one. But Dylan kept going to the same one, the let's say the one in the middle, and he would always play on it, and he would never touch the other pianos. And so finally he said, Bob, I'm just intrigued, musically. What is it that draws you to that piano? Like, does it have a different touch to it, a modern feel or more of a classical feel? And Dylan said, it's the only one that's got a stool.
Yeah, it's very Dylan. And also, like, so Dylan, but so not true, because as a musician, you're drawn to an instrument. Like the show I'm in currently, it's so good for me because I can't afford these incredibly expensive instruments, so I'm getting to play better guitars than I'll ever play. But even with really expensive, great guitars, you have a feel for which one you like.
Or sometimes it's just the
sometimes
only one.
It's just the one
the nearest one.
Yeah. This one's got a strap, and the other.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's yeah. Have you come? You've probably come across this. He did it at the time that I wrote this down. Anyway, he did it for 549 times live, and that after the lines, "You think I'm over the hill, you think I'm past my prime," in the final verse, the audience members would all yell, "No!"
Yeah. I'm currently in the year 2000 for the Never Ending Tour, so I've yet to get to 2006. But
it's a hard slog, I should think.
Yeah.
2006.
It's great at the moment because it's in probably the best period of the Never Ending Tour that there is. But so here's the thing. So he goes, "I take good care of what belongs to me." Bob loves that phrase, but like, she belongs to me, what belongs to me. He also covered You Belong to Me, an old, I think, I can never remember his name, the guy who originally did it.
Oh, yes, I know that one, for the soundtrack of...
for Natural Born Killers.
Which is a really good track.
Really good track. And I have to say, I just need to shout out a phenomenal English folk musician called Kate Rusby, who does the best version of that song. You Belong to Me by Kate Rusby.
Oh, yeah. Well, I know Kate Rusby from... She does a cover of the Village Green Preservation Society. Have you heard that one?
Yeah.
With that very thick, beautiful northern accent.
She's a phenomenal folk musician. Yeah. She's I was actually going to do it on air. I was going to ask you after this. She's playing Union Chapel in December if you fancy going.
Yeah, I think it would. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anyway,
speaking of, I've got to do a shout out to the tour that I'm going to be doing.
Yes.
A little tour. Because there was a mention of Desire earlier being his best-selling album before Modern Times. But anyway, here's the segue that there's a wonderful singer-songwriter called David Ford, who I've worked with a couple times live there was a tribute evening that we did to Leonard Cohen, and I was asked to be the MC for it and to sort of read some Leonard Cohen poetry and introduce the band and just MC the evening. So David called me out of the blue last month and asked me if I wanted to MC an evening based on Desire. It took me less like he didn't even finish speaking before I.
Yes.
And so we're doing 3 gigs in the UK and 3 gigs in Holland at the moment. And the gig in the UK is at Dingwalls on the 3rd of June, and then we're going to Birmingham for the 4th of June, and we're going to Bury outside Manchester for the 5th of June. And we're working with Scarlett Rivera and Rob Stoner from your actual band that recorded Desire.
So very cool.
And other very good musicians, and there'll be guest stars. I'm not sure when this is going out, but at some point we're going to announce that Nish Kumar is going to join us at Dingwalls anyway. And so we're putting together a list of guest stars. And then when we hit Holland, it'll be more like a Rolling Thunder tour. That's what the promoter
I'm going to come see it in Holland because I'm doing shows before, so I can't.
So tickets are on sale. And I know you're working and can't come in this country, but
I will in the Netherlands.
Yeah, I
definitely
I got to talk to them and see if you can, maybe join the tour. We'll see how that goes.
I want to meet Scarlett. That's so cool.
I know.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
How exciting.
It's ridiculously exciting.
Yeah.
So
just because you talked about engineers, like you talked about the engineer. Yeah. So this was from Chris Shaw, who was the engineer on this album. Holy shit, I'm recording Bob Dylan playing harmonica. This is incredible. He said, I'm a jaded studio guy, I've been working in studios for 22 years, but every day on Love and Theft and Modern Times, every day I work with the guy for like 5 minutes. I'll be sitting behind that console and I'll have this voice in the back of my head. Holy fucking shit, I'm recording Bob Dylan. And all of a sudden the hair on my arm is standing up and I'm looking around waiting for someone to barge in and point at me and say, he shouldn't be here. He's a blast to work with, Bob. As serious as the guy is, he has an incredibly wicked sense of humour, and he's actually a lot of fun in the studio when he's in a good mood. It's phenomenal. How great's that to hear as a Dylan fan?
It is. We're approaching the end, so I'm not sure if we're at the end, but I did want to mention that Robin, our producer, is very insistent on us pointing out that the last line is, we can have a whomping good time, at least as recorded. And if it's quite clearly it is. But in the lyrics, of course, it's whopping.
Yeah.
And in concert, he has said whopping. It was my theory that he was going to say whopping, but his brain or his muse told him to say whomping.
Yeah.
Which is much better.
Yeah. I just want to mention before we go, just because obviously Love and Theft is called Love and Theft and, Diaries of a Yakuza, there was lots of stuff taken from that. But there's far more theft in this album than any other Dylan album, really. So here's just some of them in this song. So Genesis, obviously the Bible. Sonny Boy Williams' Black Gal Blues, which says, Lord knows I'm wild about you, black gal. You ought to be a fool about me. Again, Sonny Boy Williams, Sugar Mama Blues.
Sonny Boy Williamson, just in case there are people.
It Williamson?
It should be Williamson.
Oh, I apologise.
Yeah.
Sonny Boy Williamson.
Yeah.
Sugar Mama Blues. They are bragging about your sugar mama, been bragging all over town. Ovid, again, also quoted in Working Man's Blues later on, which we will be covering at some point on this podcast. Ain't talking and the levee's going to break. So he quotes Ovid again throughout the album. And in this song, it's Can't Believe These Things Would Ever Fade From Your Mind from the Black Sea Letters. So I just wanted to...
The Black Sea Letters?
Yeah.
Wow,
that
sounds like a Bob Dylan album.
Well, he was, what do you call it, out when he was ousted from Rome. He was put on an island, so maybe it's from that. I don't know. But yeah, played live 549 times. Yeah.
Can I finish it with...
Absolutely.
I'll finish it with, Bob Dylan. I want to be with you in paradise, and it seems so unfair. I can't go back to paradise no more. I killed a man back there. You think I'm over the hill. You think I'm past my prime. Let me see what you got. We can have a whomping good time.
Fantastic.
I just realised how filthy whomping is.
Whomping, yeah. I'm just going to put some more...
How was that, Marty?
One more time, Bob. Just keep it natural,
Natural.
Okay, and action.
I wouldn't say Rolling Thunder was a traditional review, but it was in the traditional form of... that's all clumsy bullshit.
Don't cut. Keep it rolling.
Yeah, clumsy bullshit, Marty.
Bobby. Bob.
Yeah.
We're trying to get to the core of...
The core of what? What's it all for?
Well, it's like we discussed. It's for this little podcast thing.
Well, what's that about? It's this podcast thing.
I don't know. Your songs, I guess.
Yeah, I don't remember a thing about my songs. They happened so long ago. I wasn't even born.
But you said you'd give these guys a break. You said you like the name of the...
Okay, fine. Just tell me what you want, and I'll do it. I'm sorry, Marty. If I got a bit testy, Coronation Street's about to start.
How about you just read this out loud?
Okay. Please subscribe, rate, and review.
And cut.
I swung on to my old guitar, grabbed hold of a subway car, and after a rockin', reelin', rollin' ride, I landed up on the downtown side, Greenwich Village. I walked down there and ended up in one of them coffee houses on the block. Got on stage to sing and play. Man there said, "Come back some other day, you sound like a hillbilly. We want folk singers here."
You sound like a hillbilly, son.
I just thought that was an appropriate take.
Yeah.
So that's from Talkin New York, Dylan's first recorded song. That was the first one, in a recorded studio.
Original, yeah. His first
Original recorded song.
Yeah.
And I discovered, there's a lot in there. Like, I thought I knew this song, and it was kind of fun, but kind of superficial. I think it's so much more interesting than that.
I think it's the first real inkling of, we've got someone who's a bit special here. You can already see for such a young man, the wit coming through this song.
And to me, not just the wit. The actual, it is extremely witty. But the actual story, what he's doing here. So it was written in 1961. It was released in 1962. It's somewhat based on Woody Guthrie's Talkin' Subway.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that I never really grasped until the deep dive was that he's creating his own myth, and that he's pretending to be this bewildered outsider, this Western hick, this hillbilly wandering around and discovering this coffee house scene, when in fact he was a really savvy operator, and he'd already been on the coffee house scene in Minneapolis, in Dinkytown, which he described in Chronicles as being like a smaller Greenwich Village. So he knew all about coffee houses. He knew all about the
There's
scene.
recordings of him playing in coffee houses in Minneapolis. I think there's one at the Purple Onion, which actually I think was a pizza place, and there's like the Bastille and stuff, and there's recordings out there.
Yeah, he's created this character. Like it's almost like, Woody Allen created that character of the kind of, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just a nebbish. But he's a film director.
Yeah.
He's a,
serious guy.
He's a serious guy. But it's a great character. And we love the Bob Dylan character of the, the somewhat gauche,
Well, you talk straight away of like him creating his own myth. So rambling out of the Wild West, leaving the towns I love the best. Well, that contradicts everything he goes on to say about wanting to leave the Midwest and come to New York.
Well, the thing is, he doesn't go on to say that he's gone from the Midwest to New York. He presents himself as this guy who's Westerner. He's from the West.
Yeah, and was traveling around in circuses.
Minneapolis is not the West.
No, it's not the Wild West.
It's the North Country. You could call it the Midwest, like he does later on. But he's not from the West, and he loves the West because he's from the West. He says he's just making that up.
Yeah.
He's just inventing this guy called Bob Dylan, and at this point, there was nobody to contradict him. So we had to take him at his word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's a personal origin myth. It's like Superman coming from, some foreign planet, and it's this character of Bob Dylan, which I find I because I've always accepted it. Like when I saw that, wait a sec, he's not from the West. And then in the last verse he says something about the western skies.
Yeah.
But there are no western skies. You're in New York. You're heading to New Jersey.
Exactly, which I've written down. It's 15 miles west of Greenwich Village, and you can get there in 45 minutes on a train, which I love. Again, wit. It's like to the western skies. Howdy,
is
East
it
Orange.
not east? Is it not east of Greenwich Village?
No,
I've got a terrible sense of direction.
I think
as we
it's
both
it's
do.
called East Orange, but it's
No, it's New Jersey is. Well, no, maybe I don't know. Look, have you
So it
looked on the
says-
map?
It says online that it's 15 miles west of Greenwich Village, about
Okay.
45, but I may be wrong. I don't know.
We go out walking together sometimes, Dan and I, and we always get lost because
We have the worst sense of direction. Yeah.
Yeah,
So together
west,
we're
east.
not.
I have to. It has to be written down for me. I don't know the difference really. Yeah, go on.
It's the first time we get to hear Bob it's, as you say, semi-autobiographical because there's embellishments in there, but as a struggling musician, it's hard to think of him in that way now, considering he's at the pinnacle of a mythic figure in music. He's on the Mount Rushmore of it, but this is him talking about the day-to-day struggles of being a working musician, playing coffee houses, not getting paid enough, all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it did, and that all happened, but it did happen very fast.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he showed up in January, and he was recording his album by November.
Yeah.
And I think people do tend to sort of hold on to those early years of struggle. But
when it's months of struggle, it
it's-
doesn't give. You don't
Yeah.
feel as sorry for them, do you?
no, although I'm sure it was very painful because he did feel that he had this destiny. So it was. I'm sure it was very painful for him. But it's a bit difficult to listen if like I've been an actor for almost 50 years. I feel like I'm still struggling.
Yeah, I mean, I've just. When did I leave drama school? Coming up to 10 years, but it's only in the last 2 years I've pretty much worked at all, really. I mean, in tiny little shitty theatre things, but yeah.
But for Bob, this struck me for those reasons. And after weeks and weeks of hanging around, I finally got a job in New York.
Yeah, oh dear.
Oh, poor
Oh,
baby.
poor Bobby.
Yeah. And this is interesting. And in a bigger place, bigger money too, even joined the union and paid my dues, which I wasn't sure if he was being slightly that the union gouged him. But what I discovered, I researched it. The union was the American Federation of Musicians, specifically Local 802. And joining the union was a rite of passage. You needed to join the union. You didn't need to join it to work in the folk clubs at all, but you needed to join it to work in a recording studio. So this is what I find really interesting. He's referring in the song he's singing to, like, he's written a song about the song he's singing.
Yeah.
Which is very postmodern. He joined the union and paid his dues so he could sing the song in which he says, "I joined the union and I paid my dues."
Yeah, kind of meta.
Yeah, no, it is definitely meta.
Yeah. It's so this is because we've spoken about this when we covered Motorcycle Nightmare, of this talking blues style that Dylan, took from Guthrie in a way and made it his own. I think this is the start of the lead up to Bob Dylan's 115th Dream, which is where I believe he kind of perfects it and changes it into something completely new.
Yeah.
Which up until this point, it's got Bob's signature wit in there, but it's very Guthrie. This, as you say, it's based off Subway Blues, and yeah. So it was based. It's from an earlier unfinished Talking Blues called NYC Blues, which I don't know if there's recordings of, or if it was recorded. But yeah, I just think charting that course of Dylan's relationship to Talking Blues. You've got Talking World War III blues, but I think the pinnacle of it is 115th.
Yeah,
Dream,
that's sort of Talkin New York on acid, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it comes back to New York, doesn't he? It's they sail into the harbor and it's crazy adventures. And yeah. Speaking of New York, so here's just a couple of little lines I always took for granted. They sound very, amusing, but nothing more. New York Times said it was the coldest winter in 17 years. I didn't feel so cold then. Well, I thought, what? is it more than it seems? And I think all these lines, because they're written by Bob Dylan, I think are more than they seem. It's sort of, he's talking about the New York's self-dramatizing thing. You know, in New York, everything is important. Like when, you know, we've both been to New York, and New Yorkers are real drama queens.
Oh, God,
I mean that in kind of a good way, because even when you're ordering coffee, people go, next, you know, what do you want? What you got? Come on, give me something. I mean, I remember one time I was in New York, and I went by myself that time, and I was queuing for coffee and breakfast, like, you know, just like a, you know, whatever they had, you know, like a cruller or a you know, ham on rye or whatever, you know, it was.
Good pastrami on rye.
Yeah, but I saw all the New Yorkers, you know, like I was the only one not from New York. It wasn't a touristy part of town. And what was going on up front, because it was a big queue, but it was moving very fast. It was like, yeah, what do you want? And I was like, I want a thing, I want this, none of this, none, you know, no cream, I want half and half, and I got, 3 sugars, no this, and I thought, Jesus, I just wanted to be able to say, you know, in a London way.
Me, could I please?
Excuse me. Oh, are the croissants? Do those croissants? Do you have any? You know?
And I could tell that wasn't going to fly, and I actually left the line and went around to the back again and made up my mind what I wanted. Because I didn't want anybody to, you know, it was a New York situation. So anyway, New York is it's a tough town.
Yeah.
And as he says, I thought I'd seen some ups and downs till I came into New York town. Like Minneapolis was the big city for me.
Yeah.
But everything is so much bigger there. Like people going down to the ground, buildings going up to the sky.
What a great end to the first verse he's ever written.
And it's really, it's like, he's not kidding. Like everything is big, big, big. Yeah. And in fact, though, by the time, I don't know if you've heard the live version that was just recently released.
In Through the Open Window.
Yeah, Through the Open Window. Yeah. When he goes, people going up to the sky, buildings going down to the ground. Because he's already messing with it.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
You know, it
can't just be straight with
no.
Bob, can it? No. It's interesting you talk about New York, because I read out freeze right to the bone, which you don't think about that as such. You do, because you come from a place that's cold, but as a British person born and raised, we don't have extreme weather. We have boring shit weather, but there's never really that much extreme. But yet you could, if you stood out in December in New York, you could freeze right to the bone. And I really like New York. I don't like New Yorkers. It's not the place for me in terms of that. Like I accidentally got in the wrong Uber once when I was in Brooklyn and got basically yelled at by this New Yorker, and I'm quite a sensitive soul really deep down, and it really shook me for the rest of the holiday. It's just I'm not built for it.
To be fair to New York, I have to say I lost my phone in an Uber, and losing your phone is a big deal, especially when you're on holiday.
Yeah.
And I called up Uber, and they said it was a female driver and a Muslim female driver who didn't speak English that well, because I tried to make conversation with her. And anyway, they said she's discovered it when she got home. She's in Queens. She's got it for you if you can make your way out to Queens. Nice. And I was leaving in 6 hours.
Yeah.
So I made my way out to Queens, which was an adventure in itself.
Yeah.
But so anyway, just to say, but mind you, she wasn't a New Yorker, to be fair.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't know. It's just my main pet peeve in life is rudeness. I can't stand rude people, and I find New Yorkers incredibly rude. But again, you say that New York spirit, that I'm sure they all come together in times of need and would be there for you if you needed them.
I couldn't live there.
No,
I mean, I love to visit there.
Yeah.
I've been there many more times than I can count, but I couldn't live there. No.
I wonder what Bob's feelings are towards New York now, because he's not lived there since the 70s. But obviously, it was the start of his origin story as a musician in many ways. But I also think, he lives when he's not on tour, in Malibu, which is slightly removed from LA, but is still LA, really. And it's the last place I can imagine Bob. I mean, I would rather live in LA than I would New York, just because at least there's the pretense of being nice. But still, it's a very odd place.
I find it very odd too. But is he still in Port Dume?
Yes, I believe so.
So he must have created his own world.
Yeah, I think he's bought up all the properties around him years ago, and he's got sort of an estate now. Yeah. But it just seems a very when we were reading the Larry David book, and it's like they're having meetings with TV.
Larry Charles.
Joe Charles, sorry, Larry. That's a very different book. Where Larry Charles. When he's having meetings with TV executives in LA, I can't imagine Bob just playing that game. He doesn't play anyone's game, let alone the LA.
He's created
game.
his own world, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Can I just go back to the song for a sec?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to go through this line. Now, a very great man once said that some people rob you with a fountain pen. It didn't take too long to find out.
Nod to Woody.
Nod to Woody. But it's interesting because he wasn't really at that point. He had just signed with Albert Grossman, and I kind of assumed he was talking about being cheated. But at that point, he was quite happy with his contract with Albert Grossman, and everybody knew Albert Grossman was a high-powered operator. So I didn't really know what he was talking about. Yeah, maybe it's just a chance to quote Guthrie. I don't really. I mean, it sounds kind of ominous. And then he goes on to say that then a lot of people don't have much food on their table, but they got a lot of forks and knives, and they got to cut something, which is a great line. But don't really know what he's talking about. I guess violence in the big city. I don't quite get it. I know it sounds good. They got and forks and knives, and they got to cut something. There's a lot of good consonants there. And so it sounds good, but I'm not sure. Do you know what he's going on about?
Not really. No, I suppose I've always taken it as poverty. I mean, this is reading too much into it, but poverty and lack of resources eventually leads to desperation and violence is but that's a big statement for a song that is a jaunty talking blues on the surface.
I mean, he throws it in, and it is kind of, scary and true. But maybe he just can't stop subverting his own song.
Yeah.
He just can't do it all the way through without getting some needle in there.
Yeah.
Because the final verse says, "So, one morning when the sun was warm." So it's like it's a response to they got a lot of forks and knives and they got to cut something. So because of that, because it was such a downer, it's so dangerous. The people are so frustrated and unhappy. One morning when the sun was warm, I rambled out of New York town, and I decided to go back to, that last thoughts on Woody Guthrie ends up with, him saying, if you really want inspiration, if you really want to know what's true, you've got to go to Woody Guthrie.
Yeah, go visit Woody Guthrie.
So maybe that's what he's doing. Maybe he's setting up the mother lode, the truth, is in East Orange. Oh, and I also, the last line. Sorry, I'm just turning down my thing, which made a funny noise there. The last three words are "Howdy, East Orange," and of course, Bob Dylan didn't grow up saying "howdy."
No.
I just thought he's going right back into his Western, his cowboy.
Yeah.
Who says howdy? Cowboys.
Yeah. Well, it's like Joni Mitchell, that famous interview with Joni Mitchell. She rightly said, though the way she puts it, I feel is a little bit unfair and sour from her. But she said he based himself molded his voice off of old hillbillies, and he did. It's a carbon copy with Bob's unique spin of Leadbelly and Woody Guthrie and some old blues guys. It really is, and it made me think actually as I was researching into this. At what point in his career does Bob get his authentic voice not in terms of lyrically, because I think he gets that very early, but in terms of it's just his voice? And I feel like maybe another side of Bob Dylan is the switch for me. Because in Freewheelin', he's certainly still doing the "How many roads must I make?" He's still doing that voice, and in Times They Are Changing, it's still there. I think it changes I think another side of Bob Dylan is a really pivotal album that doesn't get talked about enough. Actually.
Yeah, and him finding his voice. I mean, it's changed so many times, and it's all. But I think it's been sort of organic. It's like he was doing more personal songs, so on that album, his voice was changing.
Yeah.
I don't think he sits down and thinks, I'm going to change my voice.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's almost like on that album, he reclaims something. He sort of, I do think on that album with songs like My Back Pages, he's almost rejecting the protest stuff that came before. He said, I was so much older and I'm younger than that now.
Yeah.
I thought I knew it all and I know fuck all.
Yeah.
So maybe that's when he reclaims it. It's like, okay, no, I'm gonna do my own thing. Thank you very much.
Speaking of the early days and the suffering of people who eventually become famous, have I ever told you my Richard E. Grant sort of suffering story?
Go on.
Well, I used to take. I got an Arts Council grant back in the day when you could to study with Joan Washington, who was the top voice teacher, and just to study accents and things like that. And I went there it was for 6 months, every week for 6 months. And at the time, I was working in the theater and stuff. I played the boy in Henry V, and she coached me on my Cockney accent. And in fact, the guy who was directing it said, it's too, he actually literally said it's too authentic. Tone it down a bit.
We want folk singers here.
Yeah, exactly. So I was over there one time in West London, and around that time, Joan had a new boyfriend, and his name was Richard, and I'd sort of heard about this film which was coming out called Withnail and I, and but I'd in the interim at one point while I was still seeing Joan, I went back to Canada and I saw Withnail and I before it was released in the UK. And because that's how, it was released in North America first. And I saw it at a mall in Calgary, visiting my brother. And kids were running up and down the aisles. It was the wrong place to see Withnail and I. And it was the wrong audience for Withnail and I. But I saw it, and I kind of got it because I've been living in the UK at that point, only for 3 or 4 years, I think. But I kind of got it. Anyway, so I mentioned that I'd seen it to Joan just off the top of my head. And she said, "Oh, my God, that's Richard's film." I said, "Oh," she said, Richard's in the other room." And she said, "You must tell him how much you enjoyed it." And so I was sort of taken into the other room, and there he was, sort of sitting there in the dark watching television, sort of waiting to be famous. Like, looking back on it, I can see. And he said, You've seen what did you think? And I told him, I now adore it. I've seen it many times. Yeah. But at the time that I'd first seen it, I thought, I couldn't say to him, I saw it in a mall in Calgary and there were kids running up and down the aisles. Nobody really got it. And, so I said, it was great. I loved it. And he said, "What did you love about it?" And so I could tell how much you could see how much he was suffering. And then I've read interviews with him in the interim where, he said, "Oh God, I used to work tables. I worked tables for like a year." And, he was, suffering, but, we know that
for a little bit. Yeah.
We know people who've worked tables for a lot longer than a year.
There was there's an actress, I'm not sure if she's still an actress actually, called Katie Ellen Salt, who used to be one half of a podcast called The 98%. And she was talking about another acting podcast called The Honest Actors Podcast, which was a very good podcast during COVID and stuff.
Yeah.
But the actors they had on there were not necessarily high profile, but successful actors in terms of they're always working. So, and one of the questions was always, "What's the longest you've been out of work?" And I remember Katie talking about one of those episodes, and she was like, and one of them said the longest they'd been out of work was 3 months, and she just went in her Welsh accent. She went, "I shit 3 months." Which I thought was fabulous.
So, do we have anything, any unspoken thoughts about this deeper than it seems song?
I suppose the only thing I'd like to hear from you as a fellow Dylan fan is, because obviously early stuff, I love a lot of Dylan's early stuff, and it's so influenced by Guthrie. But I have to say, I haven't looked into Guthrie's music as much as maybe I should. I've listened to bits and pieces, but I can't kind of listen to a full album and be that enthralled by it. Although I love some of the songs.
Yeah.
What's your feelings?
I'm afraid it's just, I have to confess, it's just about the same.
Yeah.
I mean, I find his voice and guitar style I can enjoy for 2 or 3 songs, but No, and I know I even have you read his
Bound for Glory?
Yeah, Bound for Glory.
I haven't. No.
I tried, but it's interesting because Dylan took a lot of his prose style, his early prose style, like the things he'd do for liner notes and things like that, from his style on Bound for Glory.
Cool.
So there's lots of, he doesn't use G's at the end of ing, and it's a bit like his songs. It's very, I've been doing some hard traveling, and it's obviously written by a really smart guy, but I couldn't finish it. And the same way I've never finished a Guthrie album. What a terrible, wow.
Ooh, bad Bob Dylan fans.
Bad Bob Dylan. But Dylan takes, because he was clearly funny. I like his talking blues songs. They're the most accessible. And of course I love, you can't argue with This Land Is Your Land. And you can't argue with his way with words. I think it's actually, this is really weird coming from a Bob Dylan person, but I think it's kind of his voice in that they all kind of sound the same, because he never got to evolve in that way. Or I've read a biography of Woody Guthrie by this guy. God, his name escapes me. He did a biography of Bill Clinton as well. It's a really good biography, and I realized what a kind of a media figure Woody Guthrie was. He was he had his own radio show in California, and he was very popular. He was kind of like a national figure, and he kind of he changed. He threw that away, or lost the show, and there were many years of struggle with Woody Guthrie, and he's a fabulous character. Maybe someday they'll redo Bound for Glory as a movie, because they made this movie, which is I really wanted to see, with David Carradine playing Woody Guthrie.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I don't know if it got badly distributed, but I've never seen it. I've never seen it on Amazon Prime. Maybe it is on Amazon Prime. I don't know. It didn't get very good reviews, but I think there's a Woody Guthrie biopic to be done out there. Maybe Timothy Chalamet can play him.
Oh God, here we go again.
You know what? We should just get that over with. This is like a couple of days after the Oscars.
Yes, that we're recording this.
We should just not. We traded messages about his opera and ballet thing, which will probably be completely forgotten by the time this goes out. But it did make me think. I did think about him a lot when we were preparing this song, because it reminded me of A Complete Unknown, and it reminded me of the way he portrayed Bob Dylan and the way it was written. Like, there's that bit where the Susie Rotolo character says, I thought we were going to go see Guernica, and he says Picasso's overrated. And I looked that up to see if Dylan had ever said Picasso's overrated. There's no evidence.
Do you think it's a Chalamet ad-lib?
Well, it's either a Chalamet ad-lib, could possibly be, or it could be in the script. I don't know. But it makes... I'm wondering, Dylan was obviously... He was the sort of guy who stole people's albums and took advantage of people in a lot of ways, and stole people's arrangements of songs. But he was definitely, he could see the future, and he was trying to manifest the future. But was he kind of like a self-entitled dick, as Timothy Chalamet has proved to be recently?
Yeah, I think Dylan doesn't... I mean, often he does subtly, but he's never openly shitting on other artists, generally. Even at his most dickish, actually. And I remember when we, on our bonus episodes for our Patreon subscribers, we did Don't Look Back.
Yeah.
And even looking at that, I kind of thought he'd shit on Donovan. And he absolutely didn't, actually.
No.
He tried to protect Donovan and was quite sad that was filmed and put out there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he made some Donovan jokes, but they were very good-natured and good-hearted, and they weren't, and no, I think he's always been really supportive of other artists.
I think the thing for me, and I've before the movie came out, I shit on Timothy Chalamet on my own podcast, which I do feel bad about, because I should have seen the film first. And I thought he did a good job as Dylan. My problem with him is, as you made this point, if you want to be a great, you don't talk about being a great. It's not for you to decide, it's for other people. And two, it's the arrogance of just like, he's a good actor. He's a good actor with some nepotism, let's face it. He's got family in the business. He's not Paul Scofield or Daniel Day-Lewis or, Al Pacino. And he's never going to be. And it just annoys me to see this arrogant arsehole talking about
I have to.
himself
I
in that
do
way.
disagree with you a bit in that I think he's a very good actor. I think he's
Okay.
an excellent actor, but I do think he's gotten the breaks that for those reasons, and that is just showbiz. And the great thing about Bob Dylan, people like Bob Dylan, is you know that he made it on his own. How wonderful is that? It's the way things are supposed to be. That was Bob Dylan Approximately with Kerry Shale
And Daniel Crespi. Produced by Robin Guise.
and recorded at Lipsync Post, Soho, London.
For longer bonus episodes, join our Patreon feed.
And if you have a Bobsessive friend, please spread the word.
It ain't quite the end.
We'll just bid farewell till we meet again.